I love the way that song ends. It struck me at first service, and it strikes me again. It kind of ends on sort of a floating note there. It's like you're expecting more. But Jesus conquered the grave. And you and I embrace that, and it has changed us. And there's no telling what in the world God will do with us as we embrace that kind of great reality. Jesus Christ has conquered the grave, and we'll never be the same again. We have been forever altered as a result of that. By the way, I just want you to know little Layla and Macy. Macy was the little one, in case you forgot. They came by earlier this week. I just thought about this. They came by earlier this week and left me some cookies, and I wasn't in there, and so I wrote them an email back, said, "Thank you for the cookies. That was really good." Macy got me an email back, I'm sure through her mother, and she said, "Thank you. I'm glad you like the cookies," and all that sort of thing. She said, anyways, she said, "Where are you, and where is Santa?" So, do you know what's really on their mind? Isn't that great? Isn't that great? So I'm so glad that they, and lots of our kids and lots of our adults here are leading the way in generosity. I'm grateful that we're becoming more and more a congregation that has the culture of generosity. It's the feel. It's who we are. It's what we are about. It's a lifestyle, really, of living, not because we are here to give time to because we're obligated, or to give money because we're obligated. It's because we are reacting to the grace of Jesus Christ. And a culture of generosity is a culture of radical, reckless, contagious giving. I want to tell you, there is no greater testimony. I'm convinced of this. There is no greater testimony of the power of God in this world than a culture of generosity among people. It is a testimony to who He is and what He's willing to do. That reckless, radical, contagious giving. It is something. It's always been noteworthy. Always been noteworthy. In fact, it got Paul's attention way back in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. And if you've been around us here at Sugar Grove very long at all, you know you're familiar with this passage. But you remember Paul, he was raising money for the poor Christians in Jerusalem, and he was writing to the Corinthian Christians. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 8. And he gave an example. He said, "I want to tell you about the brothers and the sisters that are over here in Macedonia." It was a pretty poor district, pretty poor area there in ancient Greece. And he said, I tell you, you just can't believe what these folks, what I've witnessed there. And he says, I want to share it with you. And he did it, to kind of encourage these guys to get on with their business. But here's what he says in chapter 8 and verse 1. "And now, brothers, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches." He's not starting off talking. He's talking about what really the heart of it is. It's the grace of God. It's the grace of God. "Out of the most severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity." There's a formula there. Severe trial, overflowing joy, extreme poverty equals rich generosity. "I testify they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability." Paul said, I can't believe what I saw among these folks. "Entirely on their own, they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the saints." There's that hilarious giving now. There it is. There's the joy of it right there. "And they didn't do as we expected. No, they blew our minds. They gave themselves first to the Lord and then to us, in keeping with God's will." I'm so grateful for the congregation here, the way we're demonstrating that more and more. It began with our leaders, actually. I remember the first part of this year, they all got up and said, "Here's what we're going to do on a weekly basis," and the congregation just responded to that. You guys just overflowed, and it's been the highest sustained giving that I can remember in our history, weekly giving that I can remember. It's really been marvelous. It's really been a great thing to see, to witness. And I've seen our elders in meetings say, "Well, you know what? Here's some things we don't really have a choice about that. We're going to there's a need here, so we're going to reach out and meet the need." First thing they talk about is not whether or not we got the money. They've been relying on the grace of God. Their notion is that if God gives us something that He sees that we need to take care of, then we're going to take care of it. We're going to do that. We'll reach in and we'll worry about some of that stuff later on. I mean, it's kind of on everybody's mind about the money. You don't understand what I'm saying, but that's not the first and foremost concern. Are we building bridges? Are we reaching out to our partners in ministry? Whether that's Second Mile or wherever it might be, those are important things. And you guys, as a congregation, have sustained that. You've upheld that. That weekly giving is just incredible. It reminds me of something in 1 Chronicles 29. Now, dig back a little bit into your biblical history. The king of Israel at that time is a man named David, and he's an old man. He's been ruling about 40 years, somewhere in that neck of the woods. He's on the way out. And he wanted to build a temple for God. God, if you remember your biblical history, God didn't let him do that because he was a man of war. And God said, I don't want a man of war. Build him a temple. I want it to be a man of peace. And so your son Solomon is going to be the one that builds that. And because David had been grousing about it. He built a palace for himself, and God was still dwelling in a tabernacle, a cloth tabernacle. And so he wanted to build this temple. God said, not now. You just hang on. So he's about to check out. He's on his way out. And he calls a meeting together of all the leaders in Israel there in Jerusalem. And he says, it's time to plunk it down now. And I want to tell you, we're going to build a temple, and we're going to give this much out of the treasury. But even above and beyond that, he said, let me tell you what I'm going to do from my personal funds. Let me tell you where I'm going to go. And I'm going to give this and give that and just all this generosity. And he says to them, now what are you guys going to do? And so they all line up and they begin to contribute toward this temple. It's an amazing. There's a listing there in 1 Chronicles 29 about all that they had given. But here's the thing, verse 9 of chapter 29. The people rejoiced at the willing response of their leaders, for they had given freely and wholeheartedly to the Lord. And David the king also rejoiced. You just can't help but sense the joy, the contagion of generosity. So David starts to pray. That's what people of God do. All right. So he starts to pray. And here's what he says starting in verse 10. Praise be to you, O Lord, God of our father Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the majesty and the splendor. For everything in heaven and earth is yours. Yours, O Lord, is the kingdom. You are exalted as head over all. Wealth and honor come from you. Whose wealth? That's ours, right? Wealth and honor come from you. You are the ruler of all things. In your hands are strength and power to exalt and give strength to all. Now, our God, we give you thanks and praise your glorious name. Thank you for our generosity. Thank you for all that it feels. Thank you for all that it is. Thank you for who you are. You're an awesome God. Now, I don't know if this has ever happened to you before. You're in prayer and you're praising God and you're thinking about all the great things that He does and the greatness that is Him. And all of a sudden you begin to think about yourself and maybe how, you're not all that. At least I do that. Some of that kind of crept into David's prayer here. He continues to pray, but here's the question that he raises in verse 14. But who am I? And who are my people that we should be able to give as generously as this? When you read chapter 29, it's going to be amazing to you what happened, what came out of their pockets. And what's the answer to that? How did this happen? Here's the answer to it. Everything comes from you, and we have given you only what comes from your hand. We all know that, right? It all comes from God. And there's no challenge that God lays before us that He does not provide for. Do you believe that? Yeah. In fact, look at what he says in verse 17. It's another great thought. He says, I know, my God, that you test the heart and you're pleased with integrity. All these things have I given willingly and with honest intent. And now I have seen with joy how willingly your people who are here have given to you. Every opportunity is like a little test, right? And God's not looking at amounts. I don't care what the amount is. No elder cares what the amount is. It's the legacy. It's the heart. And that's where God's looking. I want to see what's going on in your heart. And then the most curious part is a request that he lays out. O Lord, verse 18, God of our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, keep this desire in the hearts of your people forever and keep their hearts loyal to you. That spirit of generosity can escape, can't it? We can get all caught up in junk like this, like everybody. We got junk all around it. It can be gone. Now, I tell you what, if you read lots of church growth stuff and all that kind of stuff, it says, look, you got to preach on giving all the time, or people don't give and all that other sort of stuff. I'm going to argue with that a little bit. I don't mind talking about generosity. Y'all know that, right? Now, I don't mind that because we talk about it a lot. We spent a year last year about cultivating the joy of generosity. Jesus talked about it more than He did any other subject, what we do with our stuff and our money and wealth and all that. So I don't mind that at all. But I want to tell you, what's more important than talking about it is praying about it. And he prayed for God to keep us right there, keep us holding the course, letting us continue to grow in that grace. Now, David's a king, right? And we're talking about building a temple, and it's way far removed. The world that you and I live in, there's no kings in here, right? And the world that you and I live in is somewhat different from living in the palace in ancient Jerusalem. It just is. But what we have a commitment to is that weekly legacy, that weekly gift, that really is what determines the legacy of this church. I'm so grateful for all the great things that we've done in terms of the Philippines, the money and things that we've done. And I don't know if you saw your email last week. Darlene just sent out a deal, some families that are in need, that need some stuff. It's incredible. Do you know, before the day was over, she was just overwhelmed with you guys. Overwhelmed with you guys saying, well, I want to help and I want to do it. I love that. That's great. But the real legacy about who we are in the community and our ability to continue in the community is that week to week, day in, day out commitment that says, you know what, we're gonna plunk it down. So I want you to meet a guy right here just for a moment, in case you're kind of wondering about that. I don't think you've ever met this guy unless you've been up to Pittsburgh's Children's Hospital up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This is Albert Lexi, and he's a shoe shine guy. You wouldn't have guessed that. Would you see the shoes up there? Okay. Now, this is a dying breed. There's not too many shoe shine people around anymore because most people, they just don't get their shoe shined. I can remember way back when I was a kid traveling, or a young man traveling through airports and whatever, there'd be shoe shine folks all over. And there's still a few here and there, but there's not too many. Look here. You know what those are? These are comfortable, y'all. Can you see that? Look at these. I can do some stuff up here because of my tennis shoes. If I got khaki pants on, I'm going to have my tennis shoes on probably. And a lot of you wear tennis shoes as well. It's just not it's tough making an income that way. All right, tough. For the last 30 years, he's been at Pittsburgh's Children's Hospital shining shoes, knocking the dirt off other people's shoes, buffing and polishing, and charging $5. $5 to get your shoes clean. Now, here's the kind of amazing thing about this. He gets tips every once in a while. Tips usually are about $1 if he gets one. Sometimes $2. One year, a doctor tipped him $45 for cleaning his shoes. It's Christmas time, and he gave him $45. But those kind of tips are few and far between. It's hard to make a living doing this. He just celebrated last February of this year, February of 2013, his 30th year there at Pittsburgh Children's Hospital. Now, when he finally quits and packs his shoe shine kit and stuffs it away, nobody at that hospital is going to forget him. Because let me tell you what he's done for the last 30 years. He's given a minimum of 1/3 of that meager income to Pittsburgh Children's Hospital Free Child Care Fund. Now that's a fund that's provided for kids or for parents who have kids that need critical care and they can't afford it. They can't pay for it. So he's been contributing to that for the last 30 years with 1/3 of his income plus every one of his tips. He never in those 30 years kept a single solitary tip. I don't know how he survived. Now, what do you think that amounted to? Talk about leaving behind a legacy. I never would have guessed that. Never would have guessed this in a jillion years, I guess. But as of February of 2013, the record says that he's contributed over $200,000 to provide for child care. Now, I want to tell you something. That's crazy. Shoe shine people, $200,000? What are you talking about? Are you kidding me? That's the kind of stuff that professional athletes do. But that's what Albert Lexi did. Week in, week out. He builds a legacy. He builds a legacy. He builds a presence. That's what we are about. Now, one of our elders, Granville Smith, is going to tell us a little bit kind of the State of the Union. We're coming down to the end of the year. He's going to take a few minutes just to share a couple of things with us. And by the way, I don't know if you know this or not. I didn't know it until first service because I want to say it because I'm afraid he's not going to mention it again. His nickname that everybody calls him by back in Shelbyville, Tennessee, where he grew up, is Shaq. Shaq. Now, he's had several nicknames around here. Somebody calls him Huggy Bear. You know that one? Shaq. And Granville, I tell you what I call him a lot of times. I call him Granny. And I think I'm just going to change that to Granny Shaq. I don't know about you guys, all right? He's got some things he's going to share with us.
I did want to take a few minutes this morning to give you kind of, as Mark mentioned, the State of the Union. Mark and I had met earlier in the week, and he had asked me how long I was going to take. Well, with speeches, when you've got slides, it's pretty hard to tell how long it's going to take. But he immediately told me, he said, well, I'm going to take 12 minutes. How long are you going to take? And I've been timing Mark in first service, and he's taking 12 minutes. He's right on the spot. So I'm going to take about 12 minutes, somewhere in that neck of the woods, as Mark says. Well, first of all, let me commend you on being a generous and kind congregation. I mean, we have no complaints with the giving. I mean, the church really gives and comes to the plate each and every time. I mean, you all really come through every time we have a need. Well, let me recap for you some of the things that happened in 2013. We started in the spring with the Taste of Texas, and many of you, I'm sure, attended that. And it's the barbecue that we have in the spring to raise money for our teens. And everything from hugs to golf trips to fishing with Mark, those things are auctioned off, and we raised quite a bit of money doing that. Relationship Matters. That was a conference that we had with Lynn and Jerry. And it was for young people to come and try to strengthen their marriages. And my wife drug me out each night to come here to strengthen ours. We've only been married 45 years. But I found myself going out buying flowers after Lynn and Jerry's conference. It was really a good conference. The Thanksgiving feast, I want to get it right. We fed about 150 families, which represented 880 people, which was really a nice thing to do. And it was people that primarily were in crisis that wouldn't have had a good Thanksgiving meal had it not been for you all. Last Sunday, as you know, we had Ring the Bells. There was 575 of you that attended that. The auditorium was as full as I've seen it. I mean, my little granddaughter came and I got up to go get her, but I made sure the people that I was sitting next to saved my seat. It was just that crowded. I mean, it was really good. So we do a lot of things. Darlene Willis, she works with the Heritage Road School. We do things in foreign missions. And a lot of people volunteer things and remain anonymous. I don't know who they are, and they choose not to reveal their names, but a lot of things that you see are donated by individuals. Okay. The good Lord has really blessed Sugar Grove. I mean, the giving has exceeded our expectations. The Philippine effort that we had, we took up over $27,000. Now, part of that was outside contributions from other churches, which made up about $4,000. But Sugar Grove Congregation gave $23,000 of that. Through November, we were on pace to give $1.35 million, $1,350,000, which represents, as Mark alluded to, $26,000 per week. The budget called for us to spend $1.367, so $1,367,000. And it looks like we're going to be right on target. When I did the math on it, it was 99% of that figure that we had budgeted. I wish the weatherman could do that good. That would be great. Our total spending is going to be $1.43 million. And our designated gifts have totaled, as I mentioned, $144,000. Now again, part of that was the $3,000 that was outside, so we've given $141,000 in designated gifts. I may pause here just a second to tell you a little bit about designated gifts. When you make a designated gift, that is exactly what we use it for. If you say, I wanted to go to foreign missions, we don't give it to some other opportunity, if you will. If you earmark it for that, that's what we give it to. So you can have money in a bucket over here that we can't touch, and in another bucket over here, this bucket has no money in it. So we don't move the money after you have designated where you want it to go. However, with that said, our budget has been at the $1.3 million, but our expenditures have exceeded that. primarily the funds are spent in two areas: for the physical plant, the building here, and also for the ministry, which includes benevolence. We partner with Second Mile and the Spanish Church in their outreach efforts. This church is, I believe, about 15 years old. I think we moved here in 1998. And so it's about 15 years old. So things, after a while, start to break down. The entire building, this whole complex that is under roof here, is 70,000 square feet. 70,000 square feet. So if you figure the average home is 1,800 square feet, let's just say, then that's like trying to take care of 40 average-sized homes. Let me repeat that. That's like trying to take care of 40 average-sized homes. So if you just think of the things that break down at your home and multiply that times 40, that's what you have here. The roof, for an example, sprung 20 leaks. Well, that's not something that you can negotiate and say, well, we're not going to get that fixed. That has to be fixed. If we don't fix it, the roof is going to be coming down on us, and you're going to have major problems then. So some things have to be done. I shared with the first service back in June of this year. My wife called me, and that's where Mark got that name, because she calls me Shaq, and has called me that for a long time. But when she calls and she said, Shaq, the inflection in her voice tells me either we've got something or something's wrong. Either it's going to be, and she said it in such a way, I knew it was either the house or a car had broken down. So she called me, and she said, I got the air conditioner turned down, but it's not cooling. Okay, well, once I get home, I found out, no, it's not cooling. Well, that's not negotiable here in Houston as to whether or not you're going to get your air conditioning fixed. You're going to get your air conditioning fixed if you're going to get any peace. If it's at the end of fall, okay, if it's late in the fall, that's negotiable. But you're about to come into summer and your air conditioner goes out, you're going to get it fixed no matter what you have to do. Or if your car breaks down, you're going to do the same thing. So the areas that we have to have, like the physical building repair, those are non-negotiable. We have to do those. Benevolence, we started the year with $20,000 that we had budgeted for benevolence. And this is to help people who really, genuinely have a need. And they're in crisis. Well, it ended up that we spent $44,000 in benevolence. And that's non-negotiable. We as the leadership of this congregation, we're going to take care of people that are in need without question. So that's non-negotiable. We went over the budget, $44,000. Like I said, it was $20,000 that we set. We actually spent $44,000. So we currently have a shortfall of $65,000. Now, if you look at it, our income, the amount of money that we're going to take up is $1.35 million. $1.35 million. Well, $65,000 is less than 5% of that. So we're only off by 5%. It's not as if we're off by 20%. So what are we asking you to do? We're asking you to continue to cultivate your generosity. And like I said, you heard of preaching to the choir. When I ask you all to be generous, it's like preaching to the choir, because you are generous. We ask you that you would consider increasing your generosity to help make up the financial shortfall. And as you all know, beginning of the year, we committed to gather together, which included participating in worship assemblies, grow together, which included reflect Christ-like qualities in our relationships, go together, which was to encourage our foreign missionaries through prayer, and finally, give together, which included continued generosity in all areas, time, resources, and money. So, while Sugar Grove has done we've done wonderful and kind deeds throughout the year through our generosity, we ask that you continue to cultivate the joy of generosity. And at this time, I would like to introduce the financial team members. Standing in the back is Richard and Cynthia Fancher. Sorry about that, Richard. And Tom Ratchin, and Kirby. He's out of town. Okay. So those are the individuals that represent the financial, and myself, represent the financial team. So if you see them and you have any questions, feel free to ask them. If you ask me and I don't know the answer, because I've only been on the financial team like 6 months, if you see me and ask me and I don't have an answer, I will find it out for you, if anybody knows it. Also, we ask that as you give to this, that we on the memo line, you put 2013 shortfall. 2013 shortfall. Now, all of this information can be found on our website, which is www.sugargrove.org. Don't do like I did and type .com all the time. .org, okay? Thank you very much for your attention, and thanks for your time.